So I should be live now, hopefully, yeah. Hello everyone. Welcome to the Jaded Talk number 17. Today it's gonna be about the Han Solo adventures. I'm gonna run solo on this one. Pico is, my usual partner in crime is busy today, so I'm gonna make this a quick one, I think, because today is indeed a busy day. Yeah, this was a bit of a detour. Last time we had the New Rebellion, so we pushed further in the timeline as I actually want to. But we pushed this one in here in between. And yeah, I'm just gonna quickly talk about it. Maybe generally what I thought about the books. They are pretty fun. If you compare them to the Lando trilogy, it's a bit more difficult to rate them because Han has another trilogy in the expanded universe, the AC Crispin trilogy, which I will absolutely say is better individually and overall as a story. But the Han books are pretty fun. There's really nothing more to say about them for now. So they are, from the pre-Bantam expanded universe era. So back then when Del Rey first started publishing them. So they have aged interestingly in some ways, I guess, though I would say they have less problems in that regard than the Lando books had. So the Lando books are much more, well, insane is probably the correct term for describing them. But yeah, those ones are like the Han Solo adventures. They are a bit more tame. They are a bit more normal, you could say. They are just pretty basic, fun adventures that very obviously aren't supposed to have massive consequences for Han's character. They are just pretty much a momentary observation of who Han is, what his relationship to Chewie is, and like to money, let's say, and generally. But yeah, Han is not really evolving that much. As there are some things, but Han is not really evolving as a character. And yeah, we are gonna cover all three of the books, and we might as well also get the covers out of the way. So let's just start with the first book, which is Han Solo at Star's End. There isn't really a lot to say about that book. You have a picture, like you have a drawing of Han and Chewie, a very basic background. It's a cover. It's not really all that impressive in any particular way. Then I'm gonna just quickly pull up the other ones as well. We have Han Solo's Revenge, which, there's a bit more here. I guess there's the Falcon in the back, but also just Han, Chewie, a planet here. They're obviously standing on some planet. They look interesting, you could say. They are not the most sophisticated artworks you have seen, even in the expanded universe, which has some very, very scuffed covers, but it's just a drawing. I think it serves its purpose fine, and it does signalize that this comes from a different era of Star Wars. Like, this is 80s, like, it was a different, like, it had a different feel to it back then, and so it's just kind of normal, I guess, that they looked a bit more weird in that regard. And the last one, Han Solo and the Lost Legacy. I guess here's a bit more. So we have once again Han and Chewie. This is a skull symbol that's in relation to a character called Zim. We're going to talk about him later. Those are Zim's ancient battle droids that he has. It's this little army, and yeah, I guess it's the most creative of the covers, the most creative one, but yeah, there is not really a lot to say here as well. It's a functional cover that's just aged a bit poorly with not impressive artwork, but it is perfectly fine. Yeah, I don't think there's a lot to say about the titles. Han Solo at Star's End, Han Solo's Revenge, and Han Solo and the Lost Legacy. It's basically just a description of what actually happens in the book. The German titles are identical. And so, yeah, there you go. They are perfectly serviceable for the stories that they are telling. So let's just quickly start with the first one then. So Han Solo at Star's End. I think, by the way, I'm not quite sure, but I think there's all of these books are supposed to play like during the time of the A.C. Crispin Han Solo trilogy. I'm not sure if they are all between book 1 and 2 or book 2 and 3. Obviously, the developments from the book don't get mentioned because they came out afterwards. That's obvious, but yeah. So they are all, of course, pre-movies. Yeah, that's really all there's to say for now. So in the beginning, chapter 1, we just get very quickly introduced to Han and Chewie again. They are running a little weapon smuggling mission to a planet of Duran. So Duran is in the corporate sector, and it's protected by its authority, which is called the CSA. So just Corporate Sector Authority. That's what I'm gonna call them, the CSA. Just pretty well done world building. You get a very unpopulated planet with Duran. It's completely controlled by the CSA, but it's also a very rich planet because the CSA, I mean, corporate sector, it kind of gives it away. Like, they are the moneymakers of the galaxy. So yeah, that's that. Just introduced to the planet here. By the end, I'm not sure I will get all the connections. I think I've got one connection in The Lost Legacy where Han Solo mentions that he might smuggle spices for Jabba again. So that, to me, obviously ties into the third. What's it called? Rebel Dawn is the third one, right? But otherwise, I'm not sure I got a lot of connections, and I don't think I've written them down. That's the only one I can now remember off the top of my head, because Crispin trilogy, that's been a while for me. Oh yeah, the book has a notorious, wonky German translation where corporate sector was made into the gemeinsamer Sektor. So like the joint sector. Gemeinsam means together. So don't ask me why that was what they were going for, especially because sometimes they translate it correctly. So it's just it's weird. Like, I guess because corporation means something like something coming together, and I don't know, but still, like, this is a very, very, very incorrect translation. The connection was that in Rebel Dawn we literally get interludes taking place after every Han adventure book. Oh, okay. So I have to admit, I don't remember that. I mean, obviously, I don't remember the scenes that you're referring to, because Rebel Dawn, I think I've read that like at least 2 years ago at this point, and I haven't done any notes, and obviously I haven't read the Han Solo Adventures at this point. The only thing I remembered, because that sounded like something I remember, is the reference to Han smuggling spices for like glitter stem, probably for Jabba again. But this is from this book, not from the Crispin book. So yeah. So like commerce, I think that's an English word, sector. The Konzern, that's also just like enterprise sector, and Kooperationssektor, that's obviously the most accurate translation. But yeah, I guess I don't know what they thought with that. Cooperating, I guess, means to be together, and so they did the together sector. Whatever. Yeah, it's kind of bizarre, to be honest with you. There's nothing really to say in defense of that. But yeah, Han Solo in the beginning, he is kind of the character you expect him to be pre-movies. He is very closed off. He has this little line where he says he'd rather be dead than settled down, which maybe is a bit on the nose, but nope. That's Han Solo. Yeah, he doesn't want to settle down. That's not his thing for now. Especially since Onoa, you can answer that if you're still in the chat. Like, I assume this book is also post the first one of the Crispin trilogy. What's it called? I don't know the English title, so I don't know what the one was. Like, the first Crispin book, I guess, canonically is before Han Solo at Star's End. So yeah, Han Solo is a bit jaded when it comes to women. So that's and to settling down in general, just the concept of it, which makes sense. But yeah, he's a very businesslike man, which is also something you would expect. He so he smuggles weapons to like local people on the planet of Duron, and they want to like start why to explain why they are even doing what they want to do with those weapons, so like to incite a rebellion. But Han is just immediately he's a bit pissed that he even mentions that. He's like, no, I don't care. The less I know, the better for me. It's not safe for me to know any of this. Get your weapons and let me go again, which is perfectly reasonable for him. It also proves nicely something else we know from Han, which is that it's one thing for a character to be not caring about a rebellion, but as we remember from A New Hope, Han is pretty pissed even, and like he's actively against rebellion. He doesn't like rebellions or the rebels that are usually a part of them, let's say. And as much as I think AC Crispin did a very good job of explaining why he feels that way, specifically about the Rebel Alliance, this one also proves that very nicely, where Han is like, he calls the people naive, who they're being lured there by false promises. They get enslaved, so it's a local slave population that wants to rise up against the corporate sector authorities. And he's like, they are idiots. They're being lured there by, oh, you can go to these colonies, to these mines or something. You can get a lot of money, and then they end up being enslaved, and nobody comes for them to help them. But yeah, here it's really very nicely shown how Han thinks rebellions are futile in this book, whereas the Crispin books are better for explaining why he explicitly doesn't like them in A New Hope, because of course those are two very different things. Han isn't necessarily convinced that rebellions are futile in the Crispin trilogy, but he is here, which is good. But he's still, and that's also good, and that's going to be a through line for Han throughout these books, is that he still has sympathies for the people. They are very clearly inexperienced when it comes to the weapons they are trying to control, and so he's like nice. He explains them how to use the weapons. He tells them that when they go out and fight against the CSA, they are supposed to use single shots, because so there's a point that of course the slaves are gonna be reliant on resources much more than the CSA is, and then that they're gonna run out of them quicker, which means because the CSA doesn't have to care about their resources, they are much more likely to just go in and shoot at people with rapid fire, whereas he tells them like, okay, shoot single shots, you're gonna save energy, and you also, like, if you're in a jungle, let's say you're fighting against the enemy, and all of you agree to use single shots instead of rapid fire, you're also going to be able to see where your allies are and where your enemies are without actually seeing the people. And so it's like, oh, Han didn't necessarily need to tell them that, and we don't even get a lot more about what happens to them. But it's nice to get that little moment of, oh, Han kind of cares. He might think they are naive. He doesn't want to really have anything to do with them. But it's kind of nice that he still explains that to them. Exactly. So Han wants to fly away afterwards. So after he gave them the weapons, but he gets pulled in by a tractor beam, like of a relatively small ship. And what Han does is that he recognizes, okay, you can't really fly out of a tractor beam. It's kind of the point of it. So what he does is flips his ship around and fully starts to fly into the ship. And because it's a relatively small ship, it's forced to dodge the incoming Falcon. Otherwise, it would probably be destroyed with it. So it's forcing the ship to dodge, and then that way he manages to escape, which is, it's a pretty reckless maneuver that could have backfired. But of course, Han is the one who, when going like that, when like having that death match, basically, he would not pull away. So yeah, makes perfect sense. And otherwise, there's not a lot to say. It's just a pretty solid chapter. Like, they're just doing a smuggling job. Han and Shui are pretty in character with each other and also individually. Yeah, nothing more to say, really. Chapter 2. So we get another planet. It's called Eti 4. Han and Chewie go there to exchange the pay that they've got. Like, they got paid in jewels, etc., to actual money. There's a bunch of criminals there, and also another faction, more or less. They're called the Espos. So the Espos are like the secret, like the private security forces of the corporate sector. And what they do, so they get their payment, and what Han does now, it's a pretty funny sequence, actually, and it kind of needs a bit of build-up. So Han goes to like an animal shop, and he gets an animal called a dinko. He gets that dinko and goes to a credit shark that Han owes money to, who is called Pluvu 241, which is so these books have notoriously weird sounding names, and Pluvu 241 I think is my favorite one of those. I don't know why, but they are just it's a sort of funny name, so I just like that one. I don't know exactly. So he gets that dinko, he goes to the credit shark, and that credit shark, we get briefly introduced to him. He's not a big character here. He wants to kill Han because Han repeatedly in his past has bullshitted his way out of paying his paying his debts, which caused Pluto to lose a lot of standing in his with his men. So they're losing respect for him, and he needs to present an example where he can show that no, he actually can't be fucked with like Han Solo always did. So so we just get that information for now. And also, like, okay, I mean, that sounds in character for Han. To like, talk his way out of paying immediately. Like, oh, you're gonna get like your money plus like a third or something, like plus 30% when you just wait for a bit. We know that from Han, so that makes sense. And yeah, so for now, he just bought this little animal. Han goes into basically like a bar and like a dance club called the Free Flight Dance Dome. He gets approached by something which I assume is supposed to be a prostitute, which made for an, let's say, interesting conversation where she approaches him. She offers him, something, and Han responds to that by saying, quote, "Let us dance, let us become closer, let us become one, ... later." So he's like rejecting her. And that was a very bizarre scene for me. I don't know what to make of that, because, I mean, it's kind of strange enough to actually get something like this in this story anyway. And for Han to counter with that, I'm not sure if I missed something with that line, but it sounded very weird to me when I read it. So there you go. That was his response. But the place where they are, that's actually a pretty nice place. So it's filled with gravitational technology, which basically can create all these different areas throughout the club where you have, higher or lower gravitation. So, you can like fly through the air and all of that, and you can play around with that. So it's a pretty interesting place, actually. Exactly. So Han and Pluvu meet up. Pluvu ratted Han out to the Espos about, he was like, he can't directly just get him arrested for smuggling or something. So what he does is like, okay, your Falcon doesn't follow a bunch of regulations that the corporate sector authorities put up. So he ratted him out to the authorities for that. Han, being like, having sort of planned ahead for that, gives Pluvu his payment, which, included a check, so that the check with the actual money that Han still owes. And also it had it was in a little box, and that's where the dinko was in. And, he puts his hand in the box, and he gets attacked by the dinko, and it creates such a big scene that Han and Chewie have a chance of escaping. Then what they do is they go to the device, to the controls that control the gravitation in that place. They put it up to like maximum so they can't escape, and then they just Han to just very safely escape. But he still made sure that there were no dancers around or anything, so that nobody actually gets hurt, which was once again a nice scene. And yeah, that was the chapter, and I was like, I like this. It's a very fun, light-hearted atmosphere. I liked how the book didn't take itself. It's not Lando trilogy level where it's just all out insane, but it's still, you can tell they didn't take, like, Brian Daley didn't take himself too seriously with writing the book. He had fun with it, and so I really like that. Chapter 3, exactly. So there's a guy, obviously. So they have Pluvu has ratted the Han and Chewie out to the authorities. So there's somebody guarding the Falcon. Chewie pretends that he's drunk for a moment because they're like, okay, we need to get this guard away from here without causing too much of a scene. Chewie pretends to be drunk. He has liquor with him. He pours liquor all over the guy's clothes, and he gets him to go away because, of course, he can't be found on the job with smelling of alcohol. There probably should have been a second guard here, I will admit that, but it was a fun scene, I have to say. It was kind of entertaining. Exactly. What Han manages to do is, like, he went up to a different ship. He managed to get the ID from that ship, and he puts up that ID when he starts to fly away. So of course the Falcon isn't supposed to leave the shipyard, or like the airport, the spaceport, but Han just takes a different ID, pretends that it's a different ship, and then goes away anyway, which was also okay. I was like, that's maybe a bit convenient. I'm not quite sure how the technology works with that, but I'm like, that's also it's smart enough, so I let it pass for now. And yeah, we get introduced to another character. She's called Jessa. Jessa is the daughter of a character called Doc. And Doc is the guy who modifies the Falcon all the time. And yeah, exactly. So, and we get from her, which is kind of interesting, that Han once flew a capital ship, which is, quite significant. We know that Han was in the Imperial military. So that also means, if we see the entire timeline, of course, by the beginning of the second A.C. Crispin trilogy book, spoiler for that, obviously, if you haven't read it, Han is out of the Imperial military already. I think at least it was the beginning of the second book where he's out. So, yeah, so we know it's somewhere after that if he's already left the Imperial Academy. But yeah, it was just cool information to have. So Han goes back to the place of Doc to get a few more modifications. But what he needs to do is he will need to smuggle 2 droids. It's one old working droid and a little data harvesting droid. They are called Bollocks. That's the work droid. And little information droid, that's Blue Max. And they need to smuggle those to Orin 3. And Orin 3 is like an agricultural place. And since only 2 kinds of ships are allowed to land there, called robot freighters or ships by the CSA, what Jessa does is to change the look of the ship, of Han's ship, to make it look like a robot ship. It's like, okay, yeah, makes sense. Sounds logical. And then on the way there, they get attacked. Oh no, not on the way there, but they're still in like the secret base of this Doc guy, and they get attacked by the CSA. And Han, so obviously the local people want to defend their place from the CSA. Han isn't quite interested in doing that, but he out of selfishness for getting the Falcon repaired, but also out of a bit of sympathy, he helps them defend their place, which is going to be the next chapter. Hello, Marcel. You haven't read those ones in years yet. I guess a lot of people don't usually end up reading them. They don't seem to be particularly of importance for the timeline. But yeah, Han Solo, I actually like that one fair amount, I have to say. But yeah, thanks for being here. Cool to see you. Yeah, exactly. That was chapter 3. So chapter 4. Also, not a lot to say. So we get the attack of the CSA on the base of Doc and Jessa. So Han very quickly takes the responsibility to teach the 5 other pilots that are gonna fly and attack what to do. So he's in a team with like a youngster, with an amateur who, against his recommendations, is like very excited to try and kill someone. He has like tunnel vision, trying to kill his opponent, and gets killed in that moment himself. Han like gets very passionate about that. He gets pretty angry and he wants to take revenge, which is a nice touch to him. We get a little explanation on how he even manages to defend himself, because the CSA ships obviously are far better. The advantage that they have, though, is better. They have like a better aerodynamic advantage. Like they can fly in the air better. They can get into curves quicker. So they are better for maneuvering in the atmosphere. And he utilizes that advantage, that he needs far less, time to go 180 degrees to get his opponents, which is good. So another tip that Han gave the pilots, he of course didn't have time to instruct them perfectly, and he recognized that. But what Han did is immediately tell them, if you shoot at somebody and he's like, his ship starts burning and he's letting smoke out of his ship and he's spiraling out of control, don't believe that he's actually just gonna die. Make sure that the ship is destroyed. And Jessa doesn't follow that advice. When she has a hit against an enemy ship, and that almost gets her killed, because that ship ends up coming back, which was a great immediate payoff, and it immediately tells you, okay, Han is experienced with this. He knows his stuff. He has flown attacks like that before, and he knows to make sure your enemies are actually dead when you when you attack them. So it's like, okay, makes perfect sense. And yeah, so what Han does is he flies after Jessa. He puts the wing of his ship under hers, so she's high enough that she actually can use her ejection seat, which is also a great scene. And yeah, in the end, what Han does is to basically play off what he did, like, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal, that important. And yeah, what Jessa counters to him is that she says how lucky she is that he did everything for business. So that there was an implication there that, okay, Jessa seems to have some more feelings for Han than we know about yet for now. So that just stands there. I'm basically like every one of those books has like a woman Han is sort of interested in, or actually has something with. I don't think they were necessary particularly. I mean, all of them are going to be functional characters. They work pretty nicely, but yeah, I don't think we would have missed a lot if they weren't here. It's just, but it's part of the story, I suppose, and that's really all there was to say to them. Or let's say at least about the romance part. I think them as characters actually work fine. But yeah, exactly. It was just that part that I meant. Chapter 5. So Han, Bollocks, and Blumex, they are now going off together. They have an interesting little spat that was a bit weird to me. So Han gets the androids, like the droids, they start expressing sadness about death in general, like about the concept of death. And it even I think it was jokingly where it calls itself a smuggler, the droid. So it was Bollocks, I think. I'm not sure who of the two it was. But Han gets like very angry about that because he's not a big fan of droids, at least for now. Yeah, exactly. So Han doesn't like androids, but he just got pissed very randomly in that scene, which was weird to me. I don't know if that was like some pride or like on you can't call yourself a smuggler. I'm not sure, but yeah, he just got pissed about that, and that was really it for now. Han finds his contact. He's a guy called Reckon, and he speaks to him about how he needs to come with him, since the CSA, they would find them when they so they are landing on the planet. They need to decontaminate their ship, and of course they would find Han if he stays on the ship, which would not be good. And he starts to ask about, he starts to tell a bit about what actually is even the problem, why these droids need to go to that planet in the first place. And what he tells is that people are apparently going missing, and there might be a traitor amongst like their general ranks of people. And also whoever is the traitor is the one who rented out Jess's place. Yeah, it was kind of weird to me that he was suddenly so interested in what his client's affairs were. Perhaps he's just a bit more interested here because it's about Jessa. I could see that. I didn't see enough. I guess I'm not sure if there's enough hints at that in the story that this was the reason why he was interested, because before, when he smuggled the weapons, he wasn't. But yeah, there you go. That was all for now. So yeah, so the guy himself reckon he wants to save his nephew. He was abducted because he was like a political dissident. He teamed up with Jessa since Doc himself is gone missing, and he's been the victim of the same thing. So they wanted to unite their powers, which makes sense. And yeah, there was an acknowledgement by Han that this is the kind of shit basically that an idealist will eventually have to deal with. Which is a perfectly reasonable thing to say. But Reckon also does tell him that he sees an idealist, or at least one in the making, in Han, same as does Jessa. Which that's the through line I mentioned before. There's always going to be these little hints at the movies where Han, he's like the rogue with a heart of gold. He's not ill-meaning. He doesn't want to have people actually have like suffer or anything, but he's just a bit cynical, which I like. It's a nice callback to the movies all the time. So yeah, and yeah, exactly. And that was that for this chapter, chapter 6. So the group, they have a few more additions. I'm gonna mention them later by name. They are moving to Orin 3 to get information about the movements of the Espos, to basically find a pattern of movement and to then be able to search for the kidnapping victims. What Blue Max does is he sets up a false alarm everywhere to decrease the guard activity in the specific area they need to go to, which is, perfectly sensible. Chewie, so, they move in a group. Chewie moves last, so he can keep an eye on everyone. Since one of the present people could be a traitor. Also very smart. I like that. Exactly. So what Bollocks does when they are trapped is that he has speakers in his, like, he takes speakers, and he manages to set up like a false alarm that supposedly is warning everybody about radiation. Of course, everybody immediately gets in panic about that, searching for like radiation suits and all of that, which gives them an opening to escape, which is also very, very funny and also smart. They try to return back to the Falcon, but Chewie needs to stay behind basically to create a diversion, and he himself gets arrested. Both this scene and also Han being very serious about saving Chewie. He's even threatening to kill people who won't let him go there. is a pretty nice touch, and it fits them. So both Chewie being a bit more self-sacrificial than Han would be, but Han also very much caring about Chewie and wanting to save him. Both of those aspects I really liked. And yeah, Reckon forcefully has to take Han with him so he can later save Chewie, because for now there's nothing he can do, which also makes perfect sense. Chapter 7. Exactly. So Han, what Han managed to do before, they were on this, of course, they were on a farming planet, on an agricultural planet. So he stole a harvesting vehicle before. The Espos know that they are on this one. So what he does is send that vehicle to the spaceport. So the Espos start following it, even though they are actually going to a different place to get the Falcon. They get to the Falcon, they escape a dreadnought. With a pretty funny scene. So they, of course, considering it's a farming planet, Han's ship was already started to be filled up with corn, and that the dreadnought that is there pulls Han's ship in with a tractor beam, and what Han does is immediately eject all of the corn out of his cargo area towards the dreadnought, which then immediately, creates like a big cloud, basically, that also gives him it both blinds them, and the additional parts that they had, that was like part of their little costume, basically, like their ship costume, that they start to explode, which gives them an opening to escape again, which was pretty funny. Exactly. But then we find out that Reckon has been killed on the Falcon, and obviously it was someone on the ship. We had two characters. So one is called Atoir, I guess would be her pronunciation, Atoir. She's a Tiani. Tiani are like a feline cat-like species. She has a son with her called Paka. And Paka himself, he was subject to torture by the CSA at some point. He's therefore he's become mute when he was rescued again. And Han apparently suspects that he did it, and he gives what he does is he gives Torm. So Torm is one of Reckon's colleagues. He gives him a fully loaded gun and tells him about Reckon's. So Reckon wrote a last note. He mentions a place called Starzend on a planet called Mitis 6, apparently Mitis 6, but that actually was a trap by Han. So Torm instead, what they all do, what the group does, is to go through all of the info that we that they have gathered, and Torm, when asked about like, oh, where's this place, like Star's End, basically he points to Mitis 7 instead of Mitis 6. And Mitis 7 was the place that Reckon's note actually included. But Mitis 6, of course, was the one that Han told him to. That was a test, which meant, of course, that Torm was present to read Reckon's last note before he killed him. And it was pretty smart from Han to do that. I guess he immediately had a suspicion that Torm was the one who did it. It was kind of stupid by Torm, to be honest, to fall for that. But yeah, there you go. That happened. And yeah, we get that Torm cooperated with the CSA. Without his father and his older brother, who were kidnapped by the CSA, he'd become the heir of their wealth, and also he would probably get a nice little reward by the CSA himself. He offers Han very briefly, to help him instead and to get paid out by the CSA. Han very briefly questions, like, is this something that I should be? Because of course Han is somebody who more or less only cares about money, at least if you look at it from the surface level. And so Han is wondering, like, is this who I am? He can prove that he indeed just does care about money, or he doesn't. And he chooses against it, and he kills him instead, which was very well done. Chapter 8. So Han he catches a message from Star's End, because of course now they know where they need to go, and that message tells them there are entertainers that still need to arrive, meaning that he has an idea now to pretend that they are, like, his team, Han's team, are the entertainers to go to that place, which is kind of nice, and it's also going to be kind of funny. They pretend to be artists, so Atoir pretends to be a dancer, Paka pretends to be an acrobat, Han pretends to be a master gunslinger or like marksman, and Bollocks pretends to be a storyteller. They even thought of something which was interesting. They thought of recoloring Bollocks in the colors of the Imperial Entertainment Guild, and like they also put the little symbol of that of the guild on him. And they even name dropped the guy from the guild who was mentioned in the message that they've listened to, of course, to make the people at Star's End trust them that they are indeed authentic, which is all very smart. There's something interesting. So we get introduced to the so Star's End is basically like a prison, and we get introduced to the commanding officer of the prison and his wife. And his wife is not particularly slim, and Han notices that, and he thinks she looks like, quote, a parakeet draped over an escape pod, which is a very creative way of calling someone fat, and that was kind of funny. And what Han quickly does when they arrive is he pulls Bollocks to a workshop, so for now he can keep him out of a fight. So what the commanding officer wants is that, they have like a battle robot there, and instead of Bollocks being a storyteller, they want Bollocks to participate in the fight instead, which of course is not something that Han particularly wants. So he pulls him to a workshop for now. And yeah, that gets ruined by Hurricane. Hurricane is the local authority figure, but it's also it also serves a second purpose, which is to get Blue Max out of him, because of course, something I didn't mention before. So Bollocks, he's the bigger droid, the working droid, and inside of his chest area, there's a little space, like you can open up his chest area, and there's enough space for Blue Max to hide in there, and that's always used to get some kind of advantage over their opponents. So in that case, Han takes out Blue Max, which is nice. Chapter 9. So there's a guy with a keycard that they need. Han punches him into unconsciousness, and he gets let through because so he has his keycard with him now, or the keycard of the guy he punched unconscious, and he manages to go into the next area because apparently the guard didn't look at him too much since this place was so boring. And I have to say, I like the world building of Star's End. Generally, it's like also a very deserted planet. There's not a lot going on there other than Star's End being there. And Star's End is also a cool name, I have to say, for a prison. But yeah, always these like, oh, why should I bother guarding? Like, what's supposed to happen here anyway? It's like, sure, I understand where that sentiment would come from a guard who's potentially been there for years and never had anything happen to anyone. But still, it's always like, it's so convenient that it happens right in that moment. So I don't like that. There's visitors there. You might as well just increase security a little bit, because that alone should be kind of special. Exactly. So Han finds the prisoners that they were looking for. Hurricane keeps those prisoners in something that was also kind of interesting, which is little entropy fields. So basically, the prisoners are frozen in time there. And now, so it's like a very limited field which can freeze time, and basically, it basically fulfills the purpose of like cryo sleep from Alien, or what later will become Carbonite in Empire Strikes Back. I was like, I was wondering, wouldn't have Carbonite been more serviceable as a matter of imprisonment? But then, to be fair, I think Empire Strikes Back, and I think Noah pointed this out to me, Empire Strikes Back did indeed mention that this was not something that was really ever tried for humans. It's not supposed to even work for humans. So them not using that as an imprisonment method makes sense. But yeah, like little areas where you can freeze time, and that just sounded a bit too much, because if you have these little fields where you can do that in, how big can you make these fields? Like, can you trap a planet in time if you have a big enough generator for that? Or like, can you can you freeze your enemies in time? That's getting kind of crazy to me. So I was like, I'm not a big fan of that, I think. Oh yeah, we get so Han and Chewie, of course, reunite there. Chewie managed to kill 3 guys before getting arrested, which was kind of cool. I think Han reads like a little report about Chewie, and that's what was mentioned in there. Like, oh yeah, Chewie killed 3 people before getting arrested, which that's I can perfectly see that happening for somebody like Chewie. Max refuses to actually help Chewie, which Han wants him to do, until he gets Han to help Bollocks, who now needs to fight against the MK10 droid. So the MK10 droid, that's the battle droid of Hurricane, which also, that makes sense for Max. We get that Max and Bollocks do care about each other. So it's almost kind of similar to how R2 reacted to Lando in Black Fleet Crisis when he saw what happened to 3PO, which is kind of nice if you have that for droids. So basically, what Max and Bollocks do is that they beat the MK10 by working together. So he gives Bollocks the possibility to jump under the MK10 droid and destroy it from there, because of course it's like a big battle machine. I think it has like flamethrowers and guns and all of that. So without Blue Max, Bollocks wouldn't have won, which was pretty cool. Han, of course, he's still supposed to be killed now, but he manages to dodge a shot in such a way. So that was kind of crazy for me as well. So Han was in the arena. He manages to dodge a shot in such a way that it creates like a chain reaction that destroys the entire generator of the place and even the anti-gravity field that is there. And all of that felt a bit messy. I have to think it was tough for me when I read that to really get a good sense of what was going on. But then later on, I kind of understood more. But yeah, exactly, that's what happens. So Han dodges a blaster shot, and that blaster shot creates such a chain reaction that the entire energy generator got destroyed. Chapter 10. Basically, now at this point, everything is starting to fall apart. There's massive explosions everywhere, and there was one big explosion, but the shield generator around Star Zend, while that explosion was happening, was still stable, like everywhere but the top. So what now happens is that the massive explosion caused the entire structure, the entire building that is Star Zend, to fly up into the air, to slowly start, fall apart, and of course it will eventually crash down. They were even briefly worried whether they had enough power to be shot in outer space, because Mitas 7 has such low gravity that might have been a risk, but it didn't actually happen. So they just were shot up a lot, like very, very high, and then are gonna crash down now again. Of course, are gonna risk getting killed. And yeah, exactly. So they now try to get out. There's a very small scene there where an Espo, he's like crouching on the floor to not be shot. And what Han does, he has like this little trick where he can still shoot people who, of course, are crouching to not make such an easy target. He lays down his blaster on the floor, and then he shoots like that, basically from the floor directly, which was kind of funny and also, I mean, kind of cool, I guess. And yeah, we get a nice and yet very brief reunion between Han and Chewie. There's really just a bunch of crazy action going on between, like in this collapsing building with Han, Chewie, and now somebody who also was found again, Doc. So he was rescued as well there. And chapter 11, Han actually, so there's a bunch of prisoners there, of course, not only just Chewie, Doc, and the others that they came here for, and Han actually cares enough to get everyone out, which is it's pretty nice. And what Atoir does is she finds a tunnel mechanism that that could be applied to the Falcon. So they do that, and they connect it to the Espo destroyer that also parked at Star's End. What Chewie does is he takes all of the inmates of the prison. He takes over the Espo destroyer. They connect those tunnels together to have space for enough prisoners to be to escape, which is kind of nice. And Han even cares for and also saves Bollocks, who got shot in the head by Hurricane, which was very nicely done. They were pretty hot. Like Han was pretty hostile towards Bollocks and Blue Max in the beginning, and he very quickly grows out of this, which I think you would probably call his biggest character arc in a way, is what his relationship to Bollocks and Blue Max is, which in general is just very, very nicely done. Exactly. So Hurricane left behind his wife, who eventually catches up with him and shoots him, which is like, okay, that's basically the ending of a scumbag who never cared about anyone. And Hurricane is not really a big character. We didn't get a lot about him, but what we know about him basically fit this ending, which is, yeah, he's kind of a scumbag, and he probably doesn't deserve a more honorable death than this one. And yeah, so the everyone was saved. So the nephew of Reckon, the husband of Atoir, who was also there. That's why Atoir and Packer were there, and Doc as well. Obviously, they got saved. What Blue Max and Bollocks do now, because Bollocks, of course, was shot in the head, is that they share a body for now on, but at some point they will be separated again. Han has a pretty heavy goodbye here, which is it's a great scene, yet very simple. And he there's the scene also towards the end where he seems disappointed that he wasn't getting more than a thank you from Jessa, and she flips that back on him and says like, oh, didn't you say all of this was just a job? If all of this was just a job, why isn't it enough for you to get your payment and your thank you? She teases him a bit about that and says, okay, no, I'm going to fully repair everything for you. And yeah, apparently what's implied there is that they go a bit further for, quote, compensation. So that's all that we get here. It was, fine enough. I was like, this romance wasn't really a big part of the book. Jessa herself wasn't, but she was a nice enough character where you can sort of accept that. And she seemed like a nice girl in general. So yeah. And that was it already. That was Star's End. I think so. I think both Noah and Pico said that that the last one, the Lost Legacy, is their favorite one, and the one which they would probably call the best one. I like Lost Legacy, but I think Star's End is my favorite Han Solo adventure book. I don't know. It's difficult to say. I guess I just liked the place of Star's End. I think there's most. I think it has a lot of humorous stuff going on here, where you can still sort of say, it's kind of not so serious as a story. And yeah, just the tone, it's tough to say because all of these books are very similar in tone, but I think this book had the most solid structure. Like it followed logic most of the times, or let's say more than the other two books, I would say, at least. And so yeah, I think I would probably settle with this one at an 8 out of 10 as well. And because we had the discussion back when we did the Lando trilogy, an 8 out of 10 for this story is very different to, let's say, an 8 out of 10 for a normal, let's say, Bantam era or later Del Rey era expanded universe book, because I feel like same with the Lando trilogy, and this book serves a very different purpose than the other ones do. And for what this book is supposed to be, which is more of a momentary observation of Han as a character with very minor evolution, I think it does a very good job with that. But it doesn't really expand upon in any very substantial way. But it's not supposed to really do that, so that's fine. And yeah, that was Han Solo at Star's End. We're gonna jump to the next one immediately, which is Han Solo's Revenge. So Han and Chewie, we immediately get that they lost all their savings by trying to very expensively transport a lot of drinking water to a very polluted planet. So of course, Han explains how transporting water like that can be actually pretty fruitful and can earn you a lot of money. But they failed, and so they lost basically all of their savings, which is, I have to say, pretty dumb. I mean, we had that same thing in Lando, but in the Lando trilogy, it was sort of part of the story, even while Lando lost his savings from the first mission at all, which is kind of interesting, actually. And it's incorporated nicely enough. But here it's just, it's something that sort of happened off screen. It doesn't really connect to what they're going to do later on. But that's just it for now. So Han and Chewie are basically at level 0 again. Bollocks and Blue Max, they decided to come with them, which is a very nice touch because, of course, Han was very defensive about even letting droids be on the Falcon, and that he considers them close enough to him that he takes them along is pretty nice. I like that. As I said, the relationship that he has with those two droids, I think, is the most that he has going for him in terms of character development. So I was indeed a fan of that. Exactly. So Han, Han showing them, he shows them both to a stranger, like to not really Han Solo's partner, somebody called Zoniot, which was kind of short-sighted to me because Han, I think, mentioned that they, as they exist, they are kind of an anomaly, and especially Blue Max existing inside of the chest area of Bollocks, which you can open. That's supposed to be kind of a secret, and Han just showing that to people is maybe not so smart, but I guess Zoniot is somebody who he mildly trusts. I don't know. I didn't like that scene particularly. But exactly. So what Han does is that he needs money for a repair. So what he does, he keeps saying the native people of Kama, which is a bug. So Kama is the place. The native population is a bug species, which I'm never a big fan of. I don't think bug aliens are particularly interesting aside from like horror, if you really need to. But yeah, there you go. And what he does is he shows them holo movies. They gift him objects for these holo movies, and he sells those. And what he does is he accidentally makes them mad because he shows them a documentary about a planet full of water. Their planet is not full of water, so they get insane by this. Like somebody says, even, or apparently he created a religion by showing them that, and they get so mad that they start following him, which is kind of crazy, I have to say. But yeah, so then they very quickly escape and they go to the corporate sector again, or as Noah made fun of here in the beginning, gemeinsamer Sektor, so the joint, the together sector, I guess, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, there you go. Chapter 2, we get introduced to another guy called Zlarp. So Zlarp is Han's contact for the mission he had to accept to learn any details about. And he takes him hostage. So like Han, this guy makes him go outside of his ship, presumably to, I don't know, get him to carry cargo on his ship or something, and he immediately draws his blaster. It's like, ugh, yeah, Han didn't have his blaster drawn, and this is something that Han, I think, would think about to at least have his hand on his blaster and keep an eye on this random guy he doesn't know for a mission that he needed to accept before he even got any information on it. Yeah, not a big fan. The guy walks Han back to the Falcon. Han and Chewie, we get that they have a code, basically, that makes them understand. Like, if they don't do a specific code, it signalizes to the other one that there is something wrong. And Han does that to Chewie. It's ultimately fruitless because, of course, Chewie's starting to target the guy's LARP with the turret of the Falcon, but he's like, do something and I'll kill him, so nothing happens about that. Zlarp is a slave trader. He takes the native population of the planet of Lur with him. That's the planet that they're on. Han is very anti-slavery, which is a nice touch because, of course, we know that what the circumstances of him meeting Chewie were, so that makes entirely sense for him, and it's a nice touch generally. Yeah, what Zlarp does is he puts a restraining bolt on Bollocks, but of course that doesn't actually that doesn't do anything to Blue Max, who's still inside of him. And what he does is that he manages to activate the anti-fire system, which shoots out foam basically everywhere, and it gives Han and Chewie an opening to attack Zlarp and to overpower him, which was pretty great. Zlarp gets killed. The two remaining slave traders that he had with him, they get enslaved by the Lurians instead, which is kind of funny. So Han just is like, yeah, here you go, take them with you. I have no use for them. Do whatever you want, and they just take them with them. That's kind of funny, I have to say. Exactly. So that, and yeah, what Han does now is, Zlarp left behind a message which signalizes where he is supposed to get payment from, and when. And Han wants to try and get that place in his stead. And yeah, I'm not sure how smart that is to go up to some place there and just try to get money from a job that you weren't even supposed to do. So of course nobody knows you, and I think you would generally think that whoever gave Zlarp this job to trade the slaves would have known what he looks like beforehand, because at some point they probably met up. So, but yeah, that's just that. Chapter 3. Not a lot really to say. Han and Chewie, they try to get Zlarp's pay, and that doesn't work because nobody came up to them, or came up to the place where there was supposed to be someone. There is another girl that Han meets. She offers him a high-paying job, and he needs basically to go to a little hangar. She sends him there. Han, being kind of desperate for money at this point, accepts and goes there, but he gets attacked instead. He almost falls unconscious by this attack, so it's like, I don't know if the English word is the same, like chloroform or something. So the little thing that you put like on a tissue to get somebody to breathe that in and to fall unconscious from it. That's what somebody tries to attack him with, but it doesn't work. A chloroform, I think, is just the correct word for that. Because what Han has is Han has a bottle of wine with him, and if you open these bottles of wine, they start to shine very brightly, like with all sorts of information about that. And he can use that, like he confuses the unknown attacker very briefly with it. He even bites him in his hand, I think, and he immediately starts running away again. And yeah, Han now needs to go check up on Chewie because he went to the Falcon first and might be in danger himself. So he probably should have told him where he went to before he went anywhere. So, but yeah, Han immediately went to the hangar and got himself in trouble, which is not particularly smart. Chapter 4. Once again, there's not a lot to say here as well. There's a pretty nice little action and chase scene. Han fights a dude who has a vibroblade with him. I think that's actually the first mention, or at least in a novel from vibroblades, which is kind of interesting because they also have been a thing for a very long time afterwards, even though they were a new thing. So that's kind of cool. Because yeah, you have them in, like, let's say video games like Star Wars: The Old Republic. You obviously have those as well. So that's just kind of interesting that they come from this story here. And yeah, and he gets saved. He gets saved by a woman when that attack happens. And what Han does immediately is to smell her hand, which is very smart because he tries, of course, to see whether the poison that somebody tried to use on him before is on her hand. It isn't, so nothing happens of it, but it's very smart that he thinks about that. Exactly. Han is at a disadvantage on this planet because he isn't allowed to carry a blaster here, which also made perfect sense then. But yeah, there you go. That's that. Chapter 5. Yeah. So the woman who Han teamed up with is called Fiola. Fiola is a Lordian, which is pretty interesting. She's from the corporate sector. She's a leading figure, and she's investigating a slave trade ring that is also going through the higher ranks of the corporate sector. That's why she needs Han, because she can't go to the Espos directly since they may be involved, which makes sense perfectly. And yeah, we get a building up about what the Lordians are. So specifically their way of being masters at a non-verbal communication, which is pretty nice because as somebody who really likes Medstar and Medstar 2, I like the Lordians because Torque Latren, who is a character from that book, obviously, is a character I very much like. So it's cool that we got the species from here originally. Exactly. So we get also a mention of her partner, who's called Meg, and he might have been the one also who possibly got Han almost kidnapped. And we don't get more than the implication that this might have been the case for now, and the resolution about all of that comes later. Exactly. So what Han will do now is to take her to a planet called Amud, since a bunch of leads about the slave trade point there, like for instance the messages that were left to Zla. They will take an agent with them. Yeah, okay. We get introduced to an agent, like, who wants to try and impound the Falcon, and he's very not afraid of people, especially Chewbacca, who tries to threaten him, and he doesn't respond really to him at all. And they take him with them, which is kind of weird to me, because yeah, like, if he wants to try and impound the Falcon, he would probably do something else other than coming along with them. So what they say is like, oh, we're gonna get you money so that you can get that as compensation instead of impounding the Falcon, which he would prefer, as he says, because I guess just getting money is less bureaucratic than actually impounding an object, which makes sense. But exactly, so that's that. And there's a pretty funny scene at the end. So they are in a bar, and then there's a bartender there who's a sludgy or a slee. I don't know what the race is called. So it's a specific species, and he's not used to other species, and he tries to memorize other species by their scents, which is what he can do. And Han then pretends when it's time to pay the tab, he pretends he's someone else, and he almost escapes with doing that. He's like, "Yeah, who are you? Like, this is not my tab. What do you want from me?" But Fiola is honest, and she pays for it, along with also half of the fee that Han can pay instead of letting his Falcon be taken away. And the other half is supposed to be paid when the mission is successful, which makes sense. And yeah, exactly. The agent, he's called Spray. He comes along, and yeah, so Fiola paying for all that makes sense because she has a vested interest in getting to that place as quick as possible without authorities knowing about it. And yeah, and other than other than that, there was not a lot to say about this chapter. Chapter 6 is the next one. So Han. Yeah, exactly. So suspicious people started to surround the Falcon. And what Han does is he communicates with Chewie via light signals, which is pretty cool. Han and Fiona, they take a flight to Amud. But yeah, exactly. So they don't take the direct one. So they take a normal flight. They don't go in there with the Falcon because that thing is surrounded. But they don't take the direct flight because that would be a flight that would be guarded by the enemies, which makes sense. Exactly. And while trying to travel, Han meets up with Roa. Roa is a buddy and a boss from his old times. And supposedly so Roa is one of these characters who also was supposedly in the Crispin trilogy. I think Noah pointed that out to me as well. I have to be honest, I might vaguely remember the name, but I really don't remember him as a character because the Crispin trilogy has been too long for me. I just don't remember that anymore. Exactly. So he tells Roy that he hasn't been in the game anymore. So like he hasn't been smuggling a lot, which of course is not true. But his wife was very grateful for telling him that because I suspect his wife would be worried that if he reunites with a pal from his old smuggler days and he tells him about that he's still doing like successful smuggling runs, that he might be tempted to come along with him. And his wife being thankful to Han for lying about him being active. That was just a nice scene. I like that one. Exactly. So they fly on a ship called the Lady of Mindor, which was kind of funny because Shadows of Mindor, of course, the book that came out later. I suppose it refers to the same Mindor. We don't find out because it's not really important, but yeah, just a nice connection there. And then there's also a pretty funny line where Fiona and Han briefly discuss how successful Han really is at gambling. And Fiona tells him, quote, "If you're so good at gambling, why don't you fly a star yacht instead of this?" Pointing to the Falcon, basically. And he immediately changed the topic after that, which was just funny. Chapter 7. So what Spray does now is he wants to start to examine the ship for all sorts of stuff, like its energy consumption and whatnot. I didn't quite get why he would do that, because supposedly he already got paid half of his fee. That means he needs to expect that nothing is really happening. It seemed as though they agreed, okay, you get half your fee now, you get the other half when we are finished. He accepts that. He says that it's better for him to do that. He comes along anyway. So, that part just was weird to me. There you go. And I was like, yeah, perhaps it's for security reasons, in case he doesn't get paid. But it was strange to me because the woman who's with them is openly part of higher ups of the corporate sector. She obviously has a carte blanche when it comes about paying people. She has paid half of it already, so that was it was just weird to me. I don't know. Oh yeah, so of course Spray checks everything. He also checks the power of the engines. And apparently the Falcon has more power in its engines than an Imperial cruiser, which, an Imperial cruiser is quite big. So that was kind of an insane comparison to me. I was like, I don't know if I can buy that. That sounds a bit too much. Perhaps it does, and perhaps I just don't know better, but that sounded too much for me. But yeah, apparently something that happens now is that somebody put a basically invisible bomb onto the Falcon, which started to suck out energy of it and used that energy to detonate immediately. After that, after it detonates, they barely managed to even keep the Falcon flying. Spray. What Spray does is now trick Bollocks into going towards an escape pod. He pushes him inside and he ejects him out to get help, basically, because now it's only Chewie and Spray left on the Falcon. No, obviously Han and Fiola are gone. They're not here. So yeah, he's supposed to try and get to Han. We just get that for now. It's like Chewie should immediately be alerted by this. He should like get a message. Oh, an escape pod has ejected. He goes back there. He only just sees the guy who wants to take the Falcon. His companions are not with him. Chewie should immediately be suspicious, but that just doesn't really get brought up by Chewie at all, which is very, very strange to me. And it's like, yeah, he probably should be killed as well, because Chewie, Chewie doesn't take that sort of stuff lightly, but he just kind of ignores that here. So there you go. Chapter 8. Exactly. So Fiola and Han, they're on the Lady of Mindor, and it gets attacked by pirates. And when they try to go to a lifeboat, she needs to hold up her skirt. And this is a scene where Han notices that she has, quote, really beautiful legs, which, of course we can't have Han not noticing that in a book. So there you go. Yeah, exactly. And Han very quickly determines that the pirates who attack the Lady of Mindor search for them, since they are in the middle of the corporate sector, whereas they could just attack bigger targets who can be found at the outskirts of the corporate sector instead, which of course doesn't make sense. Why do you go so far into enemy territory to attack a ship that has less money than other places that you could rob more easily? Of course, in this case, Han assumes it's because they are on that ship, which perfectly makes sense as well. What they do is they overpower a guy who has a rocket launcher with him, so Han can get his armor. They move very quickly since they don't know how often the dude needs to report back, and so it's like, okay, we have knocked this guy unconscious, we've taken his armor and his weapon, we should just move. It's also perfectly logical. And what Han does is he fights back 2 guys, and then they escape on a lifeboat, so him and Fiola. And Fiola is very deeply affected because one of the guys that Han fought back against is and he's also the dude who was on the message sent to Zlarp, is her partner Meg. It's like, oh, okay, a bit more drama there, nice. Chapter 9, exactly. So Han and Fiola, they reunite with Bollocks, who explains that he basically bullshitted his way towards them, even if it goes against his programming, since he's trying to keep them safe. So they landed on a very specific place, and Bollocks became aware where they are, and he just sort of lied his way through to them. And it's like, oh, it's good that we get something like that. We had these little games when we read about Wufira in the Lando trilogy, like how much can a droid bend his own programming to, still work within the confines, but actually do which is right by our standards, which is kind of cool. And we get another scene like that here. There you go. Exactly. And on Amud, where they are now, Han needs to go somebody who's called the Moor Glade. So Glade is like a clan, and the Moor is like the leader of the clan. And he is the one who has info about the slave trader ring. And that's why Han, for the Moor Glade, needs to accept to carry out a duel against Galandro, a guy who was challenged, like who the Moor Glade was basically forced to challenge to a duel because he hit his daughter. But since Galandro is so much better as a duelist, apparently Han is basically in need of doing that himself, because the other guy would have no chance. But yeah, and in that, and of course, if Morglade dies, then they are not going to get their info. So Han can't let that happen, and he does indeed offer up to be the duelist, but Galandro instead forfeited the match, which was overall just a nice scene for now. There was nothing more to say. we're gonna speak about Galandro a bit more, just in a few chapters and also later. So gonna let that stand here for now. Chapter 10. Yeah, there's not a lot to say here as well. Chewie, he very briefly moves away from the Falcon, because of course he landed the Falcon on Amut as well. He sets up protection, but then what happens is that he gets intercepted by flying dinosaurs, which is kind of insane. And also I heard of like some form of mammalian-esque animal, I guess. And he kills one of the dinosaurs, and what he does is he builds like a glider for himself from the corpse of the dinosaur and the metal tools that he has with him. So it's like he can use that to fly himself, which is kind of insane, to be honest. It's humorous to imagine Chewie doing that, but it's also kind of insane, to be honest. What he does is that he unfortunately he lands in a lake by trying to fly like that, and he gets saved by spray, which was nice, but yeah, as I said, kind of insane, to be honest. So chapter 11. So Morglade's father, he was killed. That was something that was mentioned before. And as it turned out, he was killed by Malachite, which is a poison that specifically Zlarp himself mixed. And this is the reason that the Maw even gives this information to Han, basically, like to get to Zlarp. I didn't quite get yet why Zlarp would even do this in the first place. I was like, maybe I missed that, but I don't have the feeling that I did. So we just get, yeah, okay, he poisoned this guy. That's basically why he wants revenge, more or less. Which, okay, I mean, that makes sense for him, I suppose. Exactly, yeah. So since Chewie, he was in the water, Spray instead has been feeding Chewie and him by hunting in the waters, because he's like a water-bound, or like a creature that is more comfortable in the water. I'm gonna look. Maybe I can even. Not sure if I can find a picture of him. I'm not even sure if there is a picture of him. Spray. I'm gonna look for one. There might be a picture just to see what he's even supposed to look like, but I don't think there even is a picture of him. No. That's sort of sad. Wait, Han Solo's. Maybe it's Han Solo's Revenge. No, we just don't get that. Yeah, that's sad. But yeah, so it's a creature that is most comfortable in the water, or like a person. And yeah, so it was like, okay, that's nice enough. Nice enough, I guess. He even apologizes to Bollocks when they reunite for pushing him into the escape pod. He said that he guessed this was their best chance of escape, like of finding a way to escape. It's like, okay, nice enough. I can accept that. And I guess the characters would be trusting in, let's say, they could buy that this is what he actually thought he was doing. So I was like, okay, it's also maybe stretching it a bit for me, like logic wise, but I can sort of buy that. So exactly, that was that. Exactly, and Han and Fiala, they arrived on a ship, but that ship sent out a signal, and that signal ratted them out. So Han suspects that Fiala might have had something to do with that, and he lets Bollocks guard her. Yeah, it was kind of weird to me that he didn't consider that this thing was probably manipulated from the start. And yes, especially now. So they get attacked now, of course, because they have released their position, and now they need 2 people operating the turrets. So at this point, Fiala would be pretty useful, kind of necessary. So you could just say, okay, then go into the turret and shoot. But no, she gets guarded by Bollocks. Yeah. I mean, sure, she is from the corporate sector, but I'm not sure if it makes sense for Han to be like to suspect that she had something to do with that first. But yeah, there you go. He does that. Chapter 12. So yeah, the guy who actually did rat them out was Spray. And Fiola learns about this because what Han did in the beginning when he was attacked by that guy in that little hangar is he bit him in the hand. And what Fiola notices, Fiola knows that for Spray's species, skin regeneration is causing him to get like an itchy feeling on the skin, and that's how she deduces that. Oh, okay, it was him actually. It was pretty smart from her, which I like. And I was like, I'm not sure if that got mentioned before that his like that Spray's hand was itching. If it was, I might have just missed that, but that would have been cool. Like as a setup before we even knew what was set up there. That would have been cool. But even now, that works perfectly fine. Exactly. They get attacked by the Espos and also by the pirate ship that attacked them on the Lady of Mindor. Before having to land, and now Galandro appears again. And yeah, so I was like, Spray probably could have just gotten help from the Espos from the very beginning. I'm not sure why he waited so long to betray Han. Like he could have done that at probably probably all of the time. But yeah, there you go. He just chose not to do that for now, I suppose. And chapter 13. So Spray is actually a guy called Odemin, who is the sectorial director of the corporate sector. He wanted to take Han's information away safely, while also making him suspicious of Fiola. So of course he doesn't notice him too much. He will get the slave traders arrested, so that's a genuine that is a genuine goal that he has, and he leaves Han to Galandro. Is it bad that I suppose? I mean, you haven't read the book, so I'm not sure if it's bad or not, because I have to wonder what is your motivation for supporting them. It could be good if you do, but it depends on the why, I guess. Like I support the Empire and the Bantam era because they are legitimately not the evil people the New Republic is, but I'm not sure what your reason would be for doing that. If you present a case, I can judge that. Exactly. So yeah, she and yeah, he takes Fiola with him. Fiola is like she says, she could change a lot from the inside if Odemin makes her his assistant. And I was assuming she only played along for the moment, which she kind of does, but also not kind of. That's going to be a bit weird towards the end. We're going to have a talk about that. I easily bend for authority because of propaganda. Well, that would. I mean, the New Republic sort of, spreads propaganda. I mean, the New Republic also jails journalists, but the Empire does the same. So, my question would be for whom do you rather fall for? Because at some point, the New Republic is bigger and has a more functioning propaganda machine. So, are you ever going to fall for the New Republic? That would be good to know. Exactly, yeah. But I just assumed for now that she was playing along, and I was like, okay, if she does, that makes perfect sense to just accept the less advantageous position for now. Han basically gets an entire exposition dumped by the villains towards the end, which is never good. Like, there's just a bunch of information told to him. Like it almost reminded me of like Dr. Eggman. It's like, oh yeah, let me just tell you what my entire plan was from beginning to end. It's like, okay, you could have shared that some other way other than doing an exposition dump like that, but oh well, it is like that. So yeah, Galandro is a dude. He works for the corporate sector. He's tied to. So what he basically wants to do is to at some point be able to sleep soundly again, and Han might at least sort of appreciate his sentiment to be like, I just want to have, like, because Galandro, of course, is sort of a scumbag as well. He's like, I just want to have my money. I want to live a relatively comfortable life at some point, and he hopes Han can sort of appreciate that thought. And it's like, it was again like, okay, it's sort of on the nose that this is at some point what Han will develop to, but it's actually kind of interesting if we consider that this is from an era where we didn't know what they were gonna do with Han, and assuming he's gonna be settling down with Leia, I mean that's just the most logical choice from back in the day after you have the 3 movies. But yeah, I guess it wasn't self-explanatory, and it's kind of nice that we got that here. The Empire has a better identity and a more powerful image. When I think of the New Republic military, I think of a few wimpy dudes in crappy, colorful uniforms and weak blasters with low morale. That's sort of fair. I mean, when I think of the New... Okay, you specifically said the New Republic military. I guess that makes sense. If I just think of the New Republic generally, I think of a bunch of corrupt politicians who send their heroes to die, who commit sex trafficking, who jail journalists, and who bow down to idiots. But yeah, I guess the military... I mean, hey, if you read the X-Wing books, that's not the impression I get from them. But I guess if you don't, that makes sense. Meanwhile, the Empire has a cleaner image with its identifying army, navy, and stormtrooper corps, bombastic themes, and metallic color schemes. I guess that is true to an extent, but then again, you have to admit that now Darksaber is part of the Empire. Like, that whole concept of the Darksaber book is part of the Empire's storyline, which means that not only Dala being the second coming of Jesus Christ according to Pelion, or let's say the second coming of Thrawn, but also a bunch of aliens and women being in the Imperial military. Is that a clean image that you want to have, Fabe? I can't imagine, to be honest. But yeah, there you go. Exactly, yeah. So, yeah, exactly. So Zlarp. So what Zlarp had was he had a little save where the message that they listened to in the beginning was in. And when Galandro wants to take that, there's a data card in there. Galandro wants to take that from the save. He immediately gets stunned. So what we learn, there's a defense mechanism for that little save, where if you do not open it correctly, you basically get like a neuro stun that immediately just it swaps your lights out, like you're just gone. And that's how Galandro is beaten. And exactly, and then they fly. And what they then do is that Han and Chewie, they fly the Falcon in such a way. So basically, Odomin and Fiola, they get taken up into the ship of the Espos that is there. And Han manages to take them with him in such a way that he is directly, like, that he can threaten the ship, because the ship can't shoot back at them. Because if the ship were to shoot now at the Falcon, they would probably kill Odomin and Fiola as well. So it's like, okay, now we can bargain. I have your guys hostage. And yeah, Chewie doesn't kill Galandro, which is gonna turn into something I really don't like towards the later parts of the entire trilogy, basically. But yeah, they don't kill Galandro. They have overpowered him. They don't kill him. Exactly, yeah. And yeah, so Fiola was sort of a traitor always. She was a double agent. But what she did is actually, because Han and also I did assume that Chewie was the one who manipulated the save to set it to the stun, so that Galandro will eventually be stunned by it. No, it wasn't him. It was actually Fiola who manipulated the save. And Han sort of takes it in good humor, and he looks at her through like his cockpit window, and they sort of smile at each other, and he's announcing like, I'm gonna keep her until the negotiations are successful, to like to not be in any danger of being fucked over by the Espos, and also I guess to assume that there's something going on between them as well, and he even like blows her a kiss or something. And yeah, that's what's happened for now. Yeah, that's Han Solo's revenge. Overall, I think I like the premise of the story actually more than the last one, but I think the execution was a lot weaker in a lot more moments than the previous one was, which kind of sucks, to be honest. But yeah, exactly. We have a lot of logical inconsistencies. Like there's always these moments where it's like, really, that sounds kind of dumb. But yeah, overall, I think I still liked it. And as I said, the book does serve a kind of different purpose, so I'm judging it a bit differently than other books. So I still gave this one a 7 out of 10, actually, because still the overall story, the action, the humor, all of that was very functional, but it's not always like the logic is not always quite there, to be very honest. And so I just had to put that in. Yeah. And last but not least, we're gonna move now to Han Solo and the Lost Legacy, Chapter 1. Also, there's not a lot to say here. So Han and Solo, they work together for a guy called Grigman. So they are his mechanic. Grigman is basically a stunt pilot, and he's also a very a big douchebag. We get that immediately. He gets offered a smuggling job by a representative of the University of Roderick. That representative is called Hissal, and he is supposed to be brought to a college to Brigia, which is his home planet. The official way would be a bit risky for him to take because there's issues with his local government, so he asks Han instead, because Han has a pretty well-known reputation by now. Exactly. But basically, once again, they're out of money. They blew everything that they had on their repairs, and also they didn't have a lot of jobs afterwards. It's like, okay, I mean, that's the way it goes. It went the same way with all the Lando books as well. It's just the way they do it to reverse basically to level 0 again, to start anew. So it's like, fine. And yeah, he accepts the job. He uses the Sky Barge, which is the ship of a local friend that they have. The friend is called Fadoop, from the planet of Zahilindel, or Zahilindeli, I think is the species, and without the I at the end, that's the planet. And he basically, what he does is he does a better stunt flight that Grigman is doing, just to annoy him. Basically, he wins the trophy even because they were very impressed by what he did, which is kind of funny. And yeah, that's really all there's to say about that. It was a nice little humorous introduction again. Chapter 2. So they land on Brigia. Yeah, so Hissal, once they landed there, he's like, oh, there's something else like I need to mention. Han immediately has a hand at his blaster when he says that line, which is very good. It's always, if you have to mildly suspect that you're gonna get betrayed, immediately do that, and it's good that Han thought about it this time. Exactly. So, oh yeah, I'm not sure if this is a translation thing, but it might not be. So there's a there's a sentence where which starts with Chewbacca meowed. So like he actually it said that in German, that Chewbacca meowed, which is that is not the beginning of a sentence I ever thought I would read ever. But there you go, I did. That was something I experienced. So yeah, that's really all there is to say about that. Exactly. So the scholars that Han took with him, together with Hissal, they immediately get arrested because they brought illegal literature, more or less. So bringing literature from other planets is restricted on that planet. And Keek, who is a police officer, he gets on Han's ship to negotiate Han's payment, because he's like, okay, you're gonna get these people, you're gonna give us the cargo, and basically we won't know fights with you, so you can leave again. So what Han does is that was kind of funny. He briefly suggests that the local people of Brigia that they should use a printer to replicate their worthless and scarce money. So they have a money system that somebody brought to that planet, but it's more or less worthless, and they don't have a lot of it. And so what Han just offers them is like, here's this printer, you can print more money. And yeah, so what Keek had, because the planet is a bit old school, he had like a scroll apparently, but inside the scroll was a blaster, that like a little blaster that was hidden, and he tries to overpower Han with using that, which was kind of smart by him. I like that. What Han does is that he turns on his Dejeric board. I'm not even sure what the game is called. Dejeric, I guess. So the little hollow chess that they played in A New Hope as well. And when he turned that on, it very briefly scared Keek, and it gave him an opening immediately, which was also funny. And Han threatens that they can use a device of his cell to broadcast the crimes that they committed to the entire planet, which of course would not be in their favor. So what he does is he gets his cargo, he gets the arrested colleagues of his cell back, and that's basically what we have for now. It's kind of a fun chapter. There's not a lot more to say about that. It's just, okay, they attempted to go there and it didn't quite work out. Chapter 3. Yeah, we get Chewie being, I suppose, what you would call a wingman in that case. So Han gets approached by Chewie. I'm sorry. Chewie gets approached by 2 biology students on Roderick, and he offers them like to do a carriage ride with him and his quote co-pilot, meaning Han, which is kind of hilarious. Han, in the meantime, he reunites with an old friend from his past who's called Badur, and he comes to him, and he needs help to fly away basically from the place together with a smaller girl who's with him. First Han declines, but then he tells Chewie, and Chewie is immediately like, no. He makes him go back and take these people with them, because Badur has once saved their lives, and Chewie also considers this a life debt, and not in the same way he has for Han, where he stays with him for life, but he's just like, we need to pay him back at some point, and he considers this the case where they're gonna do that. Exactly. And yeah, a Wookiee just always remembers his life debts. That's mentioned here again, which is nice. Han is, once again, he's very careful in his interaction with Badur, which makes sense. I like that he is. And yeah, and what I like, that there was this implication when Han told him about this Badur thing, that he supposedly told him in expectation of getting his ass kicked from Chewie, like, what the fuck, we have to save him, because he thought like, oh, I knew that this would be his reaction, so why did I even tell him? It's like, I like the implication that subconsciously Han wanted to help, and I guess he just needed the final push to actually be motivated to do that. So I like that. Chapter 4. Really, there was not a lot to say here. Han decides to go back to Badur, and Hasty, I guess, or Hasty, I'm not sure what to call her. I guess Hasty is the is probably the best pronunciation. So she's the girl that Badur mentioned, and what they want to do is to find an old ship from fairy tales that's supposedly filled with treasures. The ship is called the Queen of Ranroon. Exactly, so that's just what they want to do. Han is basically dismissive, because like, that's from fairy tales that doesn't even really exist. Why the hell would you want to search for that? But that's just what we have for now. And we even get a pretty cool chase scene in their carriage. So it's a motorized carriage. It's not pulled by horses, but it was described as a carriage. They are driving the wrong, in trying to escape from people who are following them. They drove through the wrong side of the street. Even they very abruptly had to go into the brakes, I guess, or to brake their car, and that confused the people who chased them. They quickly managed to kill them and to escape fully afterwards. And there's really not a lot more to say. It's just a pretty fun, action-filled like chase scene of a chapter, and that's all there's happening there. Exactly. So, chapter 5. Yeah, I was at times kind of confused by the book. So in this case, I thought I misunderstood something here. So Badur offers Han to either bring them to and also take them from a planet called Delalt. Apparently there's a steel chamber there which has an old logbook from the Queen of Ranrun, which presumably tells them their location, for double the sale price that they would get from the treasure. Or what he can do instead is to help them get the treasure all the way and get a full part of it. And I was kind of confused by that because, like, wait, double the amount you get from your sales of the treasure, or just a part of the treasure? Why would you even go along there? I might have just misunderstood something there, or there might have been a mistranslation. I'm not sure, but I suppose it's supposed to be a much more, it's supposed to be much more logical. It's just like, okay, you can either get less money and do a safe thing and not really help us a lot, other than getting us there and bringing us back, or you can just join along for the entire mission and get a full part. So that's what the offer was. And yeah, we get a brief little implication that Han might still be chased by somebody, specifically by Galandro. Now, I have to say I was not a big fan of Galandro in the last book. Not because I think he's badly written or anything, but he's just not a big factor. And there wasn't a lot for me to think about him. But especially now, considering that he is a threat that could have easily been disposed of by Han, and he just happens to still chase him. I was like, oh, okay, I really don't like that, and it's not impressive to me, because immediately when I see something like that, I lose sort of investment into the story, because I'm like, okay, this character survived for apparently very convenient reasons. I mean, in the first book, Han killed somebody who betrayed them and killed one of their friends. He didn't do the same with Galandro, which is weird. But yeah, for now, it's just the implication that it happens. So, we're going to leave it there for now. Exactly. They're going to be accompanied by a Rurian academic. He's called Skinks. He'll come along to, at some point, translate the log recorder that they're going to find, because he can do that. He's he's an academic, a scholar, and he wants to actually join them instead of just waiting behind, because he's basically from a species with very specific life cycles, and at some point he will just not be in the position to have these kinds of risky adventures. So he feels like, at least once in my life, I want to do something that I want to do something else other than just waiting to progress my own life cycle, which is like, okay, yep, that's perfectly understandable. There was a little mention there of how much Han is spending to modify Bollocks and Blue Max, which is also pretty cool. Oh yeah, Hasty or Hasty, she's a redhead. It's always good in the Star Wars universe, I have to say. Or let's say usually, not always, but usually. Exactly, yeah. And so Skinks, and Skinks mentions some agent and very strong battle droids from Zim. So Zim is the captain, or let's say the former captain of the Queen of Renrune. And there's a like he had like parts of these droids with him, and there's this brief implication that Bollocks in some way is related to them because he like looks at them very introspectively. So it's like, oh, okay, I guess there's some form of connection here that we don't get yet. So that was just interesting to me. Chapter 6. Oh yeah, in this chapter that was interesting. I guess there you can see that that this book is still pre-Heir to the Empire, because basic, which is the Star Wars term for whatever human language the reader is reading, is called standard here, which was kind of interesting just to point out. So yeah, we get a bit more about Hasty. She's a redhead. She's also a tsundere, so like just she's like getting mad at Han for no real apparent reason. Like she's getting a lot more mad that she actually needs to be, which is kind of funny. And she also has a Slavic sounding surname, which is called Trujov, or like Trujov, which that was just amusing to me. As a half Slav myself, that I just like that. I was like, okay, cool. But yeah, exactly. That's just it. She tries to get the lock recorder, so they land on a place on Deleld. She tries to get the lock recorder while the others are distracting basically the locals by unloading their cargo. But supposedly, the place where the lock recorder is supposed to be is protected by a voice code, which makes perfect sense. So for now, they can't actually get whatever they were looking for. And exactly, and when the entire crew they try to explore further, but they get surrounded by somebody called Juok. So Juok is one of two siblings who control the local mining operation, the illegal mining operation on Deleld. Exactly, and Bollocks, so they get surrounded, and what Bollocks does is very quickly communicate with Blue Max to create a chance for an escape, which was pretty cool. We get that in the next chapter because there's the action scene there. And otherwise, there was not a lot more to say here. Chapter 7. Yeah, exactly. Now we get the action scene. It was mostly pretty fun, I would say. So Blue Max, he has something like some object that he can control and let it fly through the air. I guess it's sort of comparable to if you're seeing Guardians of the Galaxy, I guess what Yondu does with his arrow. Like in this way, kind of, he can let it fly through the air and attack people with it. Exactly, yeah. I hoped we got like more of an explanation of what exactly that is, but I think if I haven't missed it, that there really wasn't one. It's just a thing he can do. I mean, still, like that's a pretty useful thing. You probably would like some form of explanation of how droids can do that, and perhaps other droids doing that as well, because yeah, that can be a pretty useful weapon. So there you go. Exactly, that's it. So what they do, they access so they need to escape from the Falcon for now, but they get access to one of the boats that are there. They send it into space, like on autopilot, basically, so that the enemies shoot that ship down, and they then imagine that, like, they want to lead them to believe that they have been killed by them when it actually doesn't happen, which that's a smart plan, I would say. And although they leave behind tracks, where they could risk being found out, Chewie actually makes sure to conceal those so that the enemy guards they just reach a dead end where nothing more is happening. Like they can't find anything more, which is also very smart. And exactly, so their enemies take basically a bigger ship to carry the Falcon with it. They believe the lock recorder is somewhere on the ship, so they're going to basically turn it, take it apart, which is unfortunate. I mean, Han. I was like, I mostly like this scene, but yeah, Han really gets fooled a lot. When he isn't paying enough attention, he's getting fooled, and when he is paying enough attention, like when he is having a hand at his weapon or something, that's when it turns out to be his friends that he doesn't need protection from. But whenever he does need protection, he just kind of doesn't, which is kind of disappointing. And also, not everyone seemed to be armed with blasters, which is absolutely something they should be if they go out there, but they just weren't. Yeah, there you go. Chapter 8. Also, not a lot to say. So the gang, they try to go to the base of the mining bosses to get the Falcon back, obviously. And a lake is in between the place where they supposedly are and where they are right now. So they need to either cross the lake directly or to march around it for days on end, because it's a pretty big lake, apparently. And they find two creatures called Kazarax and also his uncle Shazin. They are both basically like whale-esque creatures that live in this lake. Hello, Enki. Hello. Yeah, they are both basically living in this lake. They are whale-like creatures, and they offer Han to swim over the lake for him, and like to pull him behind them on a raft. Shazin offers to do it for free, while Kazarax asks basically for a lot of money per person, even. And Shazin is kind of allowed to do just what he wants around this, like if he wins in a race, but that's the specific circumstance under which he's allowed to just do whatever he wants if he wins in a race. He feels as though Kazarax is basically a little tyrant there. He's annoying people. He has his little gangster crew there, and whoever wants to pass the lake, they also are a victim of them and their the high prices that they ask for and all of that. And Shazin kind of feels as though he is responsible for that, because back in the day he basically just let him be that way and he never corrected him. So that okay, I mean, Shazin and Kazarax, they are not really important characters overall, but I guess that makes sense for a very basic character motivation. So now Shazin doesn't want to not correct him anymore, so that's what we get for now. Exactly. So, and yeah, we have also nice little fight here. So Chewie has a especially pretty cool scenes here where it's like scaring people almost to death by yelling at them. So of course, Kazarax, he has his little his little gangsters there, like the usual humanoids, and Han and Chewie beat them up, and Chewie especially is pretty useful here, which is kind of cool. Chapter 9. I mean, that entire lake sequence is kind of bizarre to me, I have to admit. It's fun at times, but it's bizarre mostly. We get a chase scene here, where one of the gangsters, which Kazarax has with him, tries to get the raft that the gang is on to be separated from Shazin. So it's like trying to jump on the ropes or something that's holding the raft to Shazin, and to split the rope with an axe, or like to cut it with a knife or something. But apparently they're not supposed to shoot at them for some. So Han isn't allowed to shoot at the guy who's trying to sever the ropes, which I don't quite get. I mean, I get that, there's a bunch of these whale-like creatures who then appear, and there's a big fight going on, and people telling him, okay, you shouldn't shoot at these whales, especially if it's just something among them. So like their problem is amongst them, and they won't attack you if you don't attack them. That makes sense to me. But these gangsters, they are attacking them actively and want to get them to stay on there. So I don't get why Han isn't just. I mean, he had a blaster, so he could have just shot him. And he briefly loses the blaster, but before that, he had enough time to shoot him. So that was kind of strange to me, I have to say. Exactly. So yeah, Shazin and Kazarax, they also have an actual fight now. Shazin beats Kazarax, which I guess it was kind of funny to see a whale fight in here. But yeah, there you go. Exactly. Yes, Skinks throughout this entire conflict is just drunk all the time. I mean, and it was kind of amusing to me, I suppose, but it felt a bit out of place to me. I have to say, it's like, what exactly is the point of that? I wasn't quite sure of it, I have to say. But yeah, that's just a thing that happened. Yeah, exactly. And apparently Lenny. So Lenny was something who got mentioned by name before. She's the sister of Hesty. Apparently she also passed the same place. So it's like, oh, okay, so we are at least on the right track to uncover something that is pretty important here. But yeah, there you go. That's that. Chapter 10. Yeah, I wrote down that it sounded like Han is following the hobbits to Isengard, because we get a description of the landscape, and it very much just reminded me of that scene from the Lord of the Rings movie where there's like big meadows and mountain ranges and like cliffs, and it's rocky. It's like, oh, okay, I guess I can imagine that, and I have a nice picture in my head for that. So oh yeah, and for the first time, I think I'm not sure if this was in like some other book, I don't know, but I assume it's at least the first Star Wars, like the first novel in which we have a mention of the Corellian blood stripes. So like the specific rewards that Corellians get for very specific fight scenes, which is kind of cool because Han has them on his Falcon. Exactly. We got a very brief history about how Han got his nickname. So Badur keeps calling him Slick. Slick apparently is like an old slang for smart. And he tells the story of how back in the Imperial Academy, there was a scene where an academy ship malfunctioned, and Han basically needed to use like his little dangerous ways of flying to land the ship properly. So he was doing loopings to like open open up specific places that didn't work anymore, and that's how they actually had a solid landing, which was kind of cool as a concept. And I don't think we have a lot of direct descriptions of what Han was even doing in the Imperial Academy, or like in his brief Imperial time. So it was kind of surprising that we at least got a scene from that time for Han, and it was cool. I mean, it was very short, but it was cool. And yeah, Galandro actually is back, so we do get that he's back now. He goes to the crash site where supposedly Han died. He has his very expensive special tools with which he can determine that no one actually died in the battle there. I guess that works, so it's okay. And now he's searching for Han. Apparently, that's at least what Galandro says, and I don't think that there's a reason that he would lie, because it's just the narrator saying that he is acting on behalf of the corporate sector, which was a bit strange to me, because in the last book, at the end, Han is in an advantageous position, and presumably he would, if he negotiates with with the corporate sector authorities, he would like negotiate for all of his charges to be dropped. But because Galandro says he's still acting on behalf of the CSA, I guess that means he didn't. Or maybe, I mean, Galandro acts pretty self-servingly throughout this book, like the few scenes where he's in. So you could also just have said like, oh, okay, this is just his personal revenge trip, where I could at least say like, okay, Han didn't kill Galandro before in the last book to have some leverage against the CSA to get a better deal, and now that's biting him, like biting him in the ass. But yeah, I don't know, because yeah, Galandro says to himself basically that he's acting on behalf of their will, which now makes me think like, okay, he just could have died in the last book and he didn't, and that's kind of dumb. So yeah, there you go. Chapter 11. Han and Chewie, they find a landing space basically. So they search and they find a landing space, and there's a bunch of fake ships there. So it's just a bunch of, it's not real ships, and they are sort of unknown use, and they want to search for signals in the area so that they can come closer to the mining base of York. It's like, okay, makes sense. That's your target. There's wherever she is, that's where the Millennium Falcon is. And then they get stunned by something and taken in by like weird savage people. I think they're just called survivors in this book. And I don't think it was quite clear by what exactly Han was even stunned by in the first place. I guess, I don't know if it was some nerve gas or something, I'm not sure, but they were just started all falling unconscious, which is kind of, yeah, that's that. And then they are taken as prisoners basically into a cave, and they are supposed to act as human sacrifices to like to help them. Han kisses Hesty in that while they're imprisoned. I guess the scene itself is serviceable. I mean, I liked her. I like her as a character, but it almost felt a bit rushed to have them kiss. So they were, they were in captivity, and Skinks, he was singing a sad melody, and that was sort of the atmosphere there. And I guess it makes sense, but it was very sudden. So that was just kind of weird to me. But she immediately starts getting defensive towards him. She's like, "Oh, we don't really fit each other's lives. It's obvious that he doesn't take life in general and just, an honest life too seriously. And she at some point wants to just live a normal and honest life. And she points out that, that he only has a Wookiee and 2 droids with him. Basically, she asked, like, where are the humans? Like, implying that Han has some form of, problems of connecting with actual humans, and I guess settling down potentially with a woman as well, because yeah, that is what she wants, but she recognized that this is not what Han wants. At least seemingly, it's not what he wants. So yeah, otherwise, I mean, that's the chapter really. They're supposed to get sacrificed because what the survivors want to do is to escape the planet, and the point of them being sacrificed is like to, help them to increase their chances or something. But yeah, that's all there is to say here. Chapter 12. Exactly, the gang is supposed to be executed. They wish to leave the planet, but their extreme hatred for outsiders and the people of Delalt that they have is not quite explained yet, because they don't trust the others, even though they probably could help them with getting away, but they just really, really hate them. And yeah, what Blue Max does to create a diversion is to show a bunch of holograms about all sorts of things that they have. Like, for instance, the recordings of Zim's war droids that they have, and it distracts the survivors so much that the others can escape, which, okay, makes sense. I guess they are some form of savages, so I guess that is something that they would look at. And then they escape. Chewie even gets Han to save Badur. He like went back to get the weapons, and Han is like, no, we need to go now. But Chewie convinces him of going back to Badur and helping him, which is nice. Chapter 13. So the savages apparently had at least a log recorder, which was supposed to be in the safe put there by Lenny, but it didn't happen. And she then afterwards, so Lenny back then, she tried to get a signal near the mountains where the savages were, and then apparently she was killed by Juok. That's just what we get for now. And yeah, on their way further, Han the gang, they actually find the ancient battle droids by Zim. They are controlled by the survivors. Like, they stand on a specific podium, and whoever controls that podium is in control of the droids. And they sent them to the mining base to exterminate Juok and also destroy the entire base. Han is immediately like, okay, shit, we need to get there and be faster than them, and also warn Juok, because if the Falcon gets destroyed, we're stuck here. I don't want, and of course Han doesn't want to get the Falcon destroyed, so he's like, okay, quick, we need to move. So okay, that makes perfect sense, and stuff is starting to come to its conclusion, which is nice. Exactly, Bollocks and Max, they both try to get the droids to stop first. They don't just want to destroy them, because of course they as droids recognize that these battle droids are just following their programming. They can't actually do anything about the mission that they're on, and said, oh, okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense for them. It doesn't work for now. They are still going on in their pursuit, so it's like, okay, didn't work, but it makes perfect sense for them to attempt to. Chapter 14. So the gang now reaches the camp of Juok and her brother, who's called Ral. Galandro is there as well. Yeah, I explained that before. I don't think the circumstances under which he seemed to survive make a lot of sense. I'm not a fan of those, and immediately when a scene like that happens, where a character who shouldn't really survive does survive and come back and pose an actual threat again, I just lose investment in that aspect of a story. There's no way for me not to. I just hate that immediately, and that was sort of where I was with Galandro. Exactly. So apparently Galandro tries to flee in a ship, which actually doesn't happen because he gets shot down by Zim's battle droids. And I was like, okay, is he dead now? Because it almost feels like a recreation of the scene that Han did in the beginning, where it's like, make like having a fake out where he pretends to be dead, but he actually isn't. And surprised, in the later chapter, he actually comes back. He is not dead. Bollocks and Max, they actually managed to order the droids to not destroy the Falcon, because before they managed to actually find some codes which work as control codes for the droids. And so they at least managed to say, okay, don't destroy the Falcon, and they obey. But the problem is they still fight the gang, and like one of the reasons they give is, orders can be expanded. The droids tell them, like, wait, why shouldn't we destroy the Falcon? That isn't our order. It's like, orders can be expanded upon, but they don't do that with, okay, also don't kill these people, which is kind of weird to me, because that would have made things a bit easier. But yeah, that's chapter 14. Chapter 15, Husty, she has a little fight with Juok, and she pushes her down a cliff, and it very, like, immediately when she realizes that she just killed her, and like the screams of her are real, that they aren't a dream or something, she immediately gets very upset about it. Like, she has almost like a panic attack or something, where it's like, oh, okay. I mean, it's actually pretty nice to have that scene, because you can see that she is not used to just killing someone, and that it clearly affects her, which is the way that it would work if you're not used to doing stuff like that. So it was actually a pretty nice scene, I have to say. Egome Fuss. So Egome Fuss, he's like a third character from the mining corporation, who is like their bodyguard. He's even supposedly bigger than Chewie, which I guess there would be a human who's bigger than Chewie. He has another battle with them. So they had one briefly before, where I think Egome like punched Chewie's head from behind, and he did the same again. So now Chewie is like really pissed off, and he starts fighting him, and he beats him. And Hesty is even like, she even says to Han, like, are you not gonna help him? And he's like, no, he wouldn't appreciate that. Like, this is his fight, which is also a nice scene, and that makes sense for Chewie as well. Exactly. So all the ancient battle droids, they destroy everything but the Falcon. But they move over a bridge. That bridge is very old. So, and it crumbles under the weight, and basically all of the battle droids get destroyed. It's like, oh well, I mean, that's it for the droids then. Exactly. And so now the team is separated from the Falcon. So the Falcon is on the other side of the bridge that is now destroyed. And only I think Bollix and Blue Max were there. And there was a pretty nice scene where they're like waving their hands at Han or something, and Han had his little internal thought where he was like, at this point, Han considered them part, like a permanent part of the team, which is like, as I said, I think their relationship is the only thing you could really call a character arc for Han throughout these books, and I think it's nicely done. I mean, it's very short. Those are short books. I mean, all of them are around 200 pages in length, a bit more. And so there's not a lot of space to do like a big emotional story with big payoffs if you also have all of this action stuff going on. But I think that their relationship was done nicely enough, actually, which is cool. Exactly. But actually, someone who was on the other side as well is Glandro, who now takes the Falcon. He lands next to the guys, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna team up with you guys now. We're gonna work together now to get the to get the treasure. And he lets them onto the ship so that they fly together. And it's like, okay, I get that they wouldn't openly antagonize him while he is in the ship and they are outside, because he is in the advantage. But as soon as they move into the ship, they should all just point their weapons at him, like, okay, you're fucked now. Move away. Or just kill him without remorse. Because Galandro, that's his big thing. He's like a very skilled marksman. He has these inhuman reaction time. And it's like, oh, and they even explicitly mention that as a reason why they don't try anything. But I was like, yeah, I don't quite buy that. Like, if he has turned his back towards you, like to be in the Falcon, someone can shoot at him. So I didn't quite buy that. And chapter 16, last but not least, so we get what the survivors even attempted to do. They basically had delusions of grandeur. They wanted to try and use Zim's battle droids to control the sector, or like to take over the general region, because they come from the time of the Old Republic, so like the Galactic Republic. And I think at least they say Old Republic, so it's always a question what exactly they mean, but I assume Galactic Republic at least. Because back then they were like, at the time, they were a stable government that they couldn't really oppose, and so starting to try and a rise up there wouldn't have worked. But yeah, in this case now, apparently that's something that they said in the book, which I don't quite believe, is that the Empire is struggling. And I mean, this is before A New Hope, which means now the Empire should be at the height of their power, probably. Like they have control of basically everything. So I'm not sure I really buy that. But yeah, now that the Empire supposedly is struggling, they want to try and break free, basically, and control the region. And Zim's army was supposed to be their way of doing that. I mean, I guess that makes sense overall. It wasn't particularly interesting to me overall. It was serviceable, I think I would say. So Han, of course, and Galandro, when they actually find the place where the treasures are hidden, Galandro, of course, orders Han, or like challenges Han to another duel. Han loses. I mean, sure, Galandro is very skilled, but I was like, okay, cool. You wanted to arrest him now and to bring him back to the corporate sector. And he said, like, to send a message to them to not mistreat him, or like to not underestimate him, I guess. So that also confused me, because then I was like, okay, are you acting on behalf of the corporate sector now, or don't you? I guess I'm supposed to take away that he isn't doing that for now. I guess he just has their support. But yeah, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Han is arrested now. But of course, I mean, nothing happens from that really. Galandro actually, once again, he also notices, like, Han, you're not really all that immoral like you think you are. You're actually kind of nice, but and you would turn out to be a lot more cynical in your later years. Which Han, I mean, admittedly does turn into a bit more, but he's still, and it's something that's always mentioned. We talked about the New Rebellion last week. There has been these scenes where all the other smugglers and Lando agree, like, yeah, we always knew you don't quite fit in here. You actually do somewhat care more than other smugglers do. And it's cool because that's very in line with what this book also establishes. Yeah, but ultimately, so Skings was there with Han, and he manages to kill Galandro. So he's like hiding in a corner, and he took out a warning mechanism, basically, like a warning light or something that was in the wall. And those lights trigger the self-defense turrets, and Stinks manages to point that basically like towards Galandro, so he immediately gets shot by all these turrets. I mean, which I guess it's sort of cool that Skinks was the one who defended himself there, because he was like sort of the skittish, not really fearful, but I guess he respected the threat that he was going into, whereas the other ones are more used to threats. So I guess it's kind of cool that he got the kill here, but yeah, I was not a fan of the whole Galandro thing. I'm not. It just didn't work for me overall, I would say. But yeah, there's that. Then they actually find the treasure, and the thing with the treasure is that it actually, back in the day when Zim found it, it would have been worth a whole lot, because it's like it's a bunch of materials that's very important for like weapon manufacturing. But by now, these materials have been so mass produced that they're essentially worthless. So they once again sit on really not a lot. Which, I mean, it's sad, but we, of course, Han can't be rich before the movie, so like, or he can't stay rich at least, so it makes sense. Like, oh, I mean, I guess that's sad, but that's very believable, at least. So I perfectly understood that. And what they will do instead is that everyone. So what they now do is that everyone basically is gonna get a job at the museum that Skinks is gonna work for, or like the the research facilities, like the whole academic thing that Skinks has going on. Both Badu and Hesty are gonna follow him, and also Blue Max and Bollocks, who are gonna help him with Zim's battle droids. And even Han was like, he wasn't quite ready to have like such a heavy goodbye, so he just leaves with Chewie together. And they even call him, because the enemies here were called the survivors. They call him like, oh, he's the true survivor. That's like sort of the last sentence of the book, which was a very nice touch. And it's like, oh yeah, it's so like Han is sad, and he tries to kind of play it off, and show like the romance with Hesty that also that was just left off at, you're not quite there yet. You seem to not take life that seriously. So yeah, that was it. That was Han Solo and the Lost Legacy. I really like this one as well. It also had a lot of how can I say, logic bending moments for me, even though I'm already kind of trying to not be as sensitive about it here as I am in other books. But still, the premise I thought was very interesting. I like this whole, ancient stuff where it like trying to find a treasure or a whole lot. It didn't quite get this Indiana Jones feeling for me as the Lando trilogy, like the first Lando trilogy book, The Mind Top of Sharu, got for me. But I still think it was nicely done. And I think for this one, I'll settle like at a 7.5 out of 10 probably, so that my ranking is Star's End number 1, then Lost Legacy, and then Revenge. And yeah, that's it. That's the entire trilogy. So that was this little detour that we took here. Yeah, I guess there isn't really a whole lot to speak about. I still think, yeah, I know that you think that. I think Pico also thinks that. He also said the same. I don't know. I think, I mean, all of them have their little problems, which is unavoidable, especially the way that they have been written. But to me, it felt like Star's End had the least of them. So 1, 3, 2. That's my ranking. But I mean, I perfectly enjoyed Lost Legacy, and I can at least see why you put this one at number 1. Yeah, that's that. I guess if that's it, then there's really nothing more to speak about. So next Sunday, I'm gonna have to pause because I'm gonna be busy with private stuff. So no stream next Sunday. What is it? But yeah, the Sunday afterwards, I'm gonna be doing Ambush at Corellia. We're finally moving into the Corellian trilogy. We're getting towards the end of Bantam, slowly but surely. And yeah, Ambush at Corellia is gonna be the week after next week. So this Sunday's like the next Sunday is gonna be a pause. You know how Kevin J. Anderson connected these books to? You mean the Han Solo adventures? I'm almost afraid to ask, but no, I don't. How did he? If you want to, you can just quickly jump into the StreamYard if you wanna and explain it. I guess it's quicker than typing if you want to. But no, I am not aware of how he did. Please enlighten us with a nice little Kevinism towards the end. I'm sure that would be I'm sure that will be all fine. Anya Galandro is in YJK, his daughter. Wait, Galandro is a surname? Why the hell would Galandro be a surname? I mean, is it just me, or didn't I get from this book like it's Galandro is his given name? That's sort of weird. She's a drug. I mean, yeah. She didn't quite have the nicest father, I suppose. So you can get that. I can understand why she would be. His full name is Inba Galandro. Okay. I guess that's weird. I just expected Galandro to be his given name. I didn't expect it to to be his family. But there you go. Hey, there's Kevin. Kevin has done a Kevin to make a drug addict daughter. But does she have a nice arc at least, or is she just like, oh, you remember this name? Like, does she get something to do at least? It would be at least cool that if she has something nice, but she's the highlight of the final 3 books. Hey, there you go. Perhaps Kevin can make me appreciate this book more, which is not usually something I believe Kevin can do, but maybe. She ends up working for Lando and never ever getting mentioned. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the expanded universe curse. All of these species, characters, ships, weapons that sort of seem very important for one book and never get mentioned again. But hey, if we're just supposed to take away from that she lives happily ever after in some normal life, then I can perfectly accept that. No, yeah, there you go. I think that's all there is to say about this book for now. gonna wait and see for the Young Jedi Knights connection. Maybe there's some other things that that are referenced by the that are referenced from the Han Solo trilogy. And yeah, as I said, next Sunday, no stream. The Sunday afterwards, we're going to do Ambush at Corellia. Hopefully, I'm going to have a little team again, at least Pico. But yeah, today was a busy day for all of us. So it's actually good that I just managed to push this one out very quickly. And yeah, thanks for listening this long if you managed to stay until here. And see you next time. Bye-bye.